Hello beautiful people, it's Steph here if you don't already know, and on this channel I just talk about all things careers and all things lifestyle. And in today's video I am going to be answering some of the monthly questions that you guys have sent in. Now I know I've missed a couple of months, my bad, I'm very sorry about that. I don't even have an excuse, I've just been very busy with a lot of other stuff, but I have been keeping track of all of the questions that have come in. I've got them all here on my phone, so I'm just going to run through them and make sure that I give you guys all the answers that you have asked for. So let's get straight into it. But if you like this type of content, please do make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, and let's go. The first question we've got is, what would you tell yourself during the application process? What would you have done differently? Good question. I think a couple of things. One of the first things I would tell myself, because I guess the application cycle where I was successful was when I was in my third year, right? When I did my winter vac scheme. That's like the successful application cycle that I did. To be fair, I also did a vac scheme in the summer of second year. So I guess that was also a successful one. But anyway, one of the things I would tell myself in relation to that would be start early, not even so much in the sense of applying for things, but more so just in the sense of like going to events and asking people what the process was. Because once I started actually speaking to people like in my cohort about what they were doing, I actually realized that a lot of them had been like going to presentations and stuff like that right from when they were in sixth form, to be honest, or even from when they were in first year. And I just wasn't on the ball like that. Like I didn't know that that's what I should have been doing, if that makes sense. So only when I then found that out, that I was like, oh, okay, let me also get to some presentations as well. So then I did, and then I obviously started networking, meeting people, all that kind of stuff, and then did successful applications. So yeah, I would just say like maybe speak to people around you who are in the same boat, because they may have tips for you that you haven't considered or you haven't thought of, and then start like as early as possible. The other thing that I would do differently is focus a lot more on my transferable skills, as opposed to putting myself down for not having a lot of legal experience. And I say that because especially when you're applying for a vac scheme is legal experience, so there is less of an expectation for you to have legal experience to apply for more legal experience, if that makes sense. They know you are applying for legal experience, so the expectation there is more so that you are able to show that whatever experience you do have, whether paid or voluntary, is transferable. That's more the expectation there. Now, if you're applying for a direct TC, then I would say there is more of an expectation that you have legal experience. But that's a slightly different scenario. Like most people don't apply for a direct TC unless they're perhaps a graduate, maybe they've already paralegaled, or they've already done some other kind of legal work experience for a while, that sort of thing. That's usually when people apply for a direct TC, because they already probably kind of know what it is they want to do anyway, and they know the type of firm they want to work at. Whereas when you're applying for a vac scheme, like you're not really entirely sure. So that's definitely the second thing I would say, like focus a lot on the transferable skills. Second question, so how can I improve my understanding of a client's needs? Like for example, I read in the news that the FCA plans to have more regulation on BNPL, buy now pay later. How do I learn to know how it will affect my client who works in the industry, if you get what I mean? How do you learn to think for the clients? I think this just comes with time and with practice. So one of the best things that helped me think of the client's needs was to actually just think about myself. Now, I was about to say I'm not a business owner. I am a business owner, but I'm not a business owner in the sense that like the clients I serve are business owners, right? Like my company is not worth billions of pounds or anything like that. However, I do tend to have similar needs to the customers of the clients that I work for. So let's say my client is, and this is absolutely fake by the way, so like this is not one of my clients that I personally work for, but let's say my client is like, I don't know, McDonald's, and I eat McDonald's, like I would know what, actually no, let me not use that as an example. Let me use a real example that I can think of. Let's say my client is Nando's. My client is not Nando's, by the way. But let's say my client is Nando's and there's a chicken shortage. I don't know if you guys remember when there was a chicken shortage and like Nando's and KFC and a couple of other restaurants didn't have chicken. I want to go to Nando's and there's no chicken. That impacts my experience as a customer of Nando's, right? So I can imagine that as someone who owns Nando's, my worry when something like that happens is, how do we keep like the customer experience going so that our customers will still be happy, so that we don't lose profit, blah, 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 blah. And that's something that's easy for me to think about because I know how I felt when I couldn't get chicken at Nando's. Do you get what I mean? So if we're going back to this buy now, pay later example, and you're trying to think like, how could new regulations impact your client that you're serving? The first thing I would think is, well, what is your client worried about, right? Your client is probably worried about the fact that if new regulation comes in, they need to make sure they're compliant with this new regulation. So how does this impact the client? They're going to need to go and get some advice from their lawyers because they need to know what do they need to do to be compliant. If they're already if they're already, not compliant? Yeah, if they're already not compliant with this regulation, what do they need to do to change that so that they now can be compliant? Is there anything that they need to be looking out for? Like all that kind of stuff. How much is this going to cost? Because remember, for a business, majority of the time, what you're worried about is your bottom line, your profit. So how much is all of this going to cost? Those are the general things that you're going to be thinking about. But aside from that, the more you are in a particular industry, so the more you work with this particular client, the quicker you will be at picking up on, oh, this has happened and this is going to affect my client because I've heard that this kind of thing happened before and it affected my client in this way. Do you know what I mean? So I hope that helps. A summary thing that I would say, just in terms of any regulation in general, whenever new regulation comes in, the general kind of issues for your client that's going to come up is, are they in compliance? What do they need to do to get in compliance? How much is it going to cost? Like, those are the main three things that they're going to want to know about. And then obviously, depending on the particular industry and all that kind of stuff, you can kind of tailor it a bit more to make it more specific. But if you think about those three things, you should be all right. Next question, how to make applications stand out. I think I've mentioned this before, but I think the best thing you can do is be unique. And the best way that you can be unique is by knowing how to tell your story, i.e. marketing yourself, and talking truthfully about your experiences, about yourself. No two people have the same experiences. Like, literally, whether you are identical twins or whatever, like, no two people have the exact same experiences in life. So if you can figure out how to work out your personal brand so that you can thread all of that together. I do have a whole hour-long webinar on this in the Aspiring Solicitors Toolkit. So if you want to get that, the link will be down below. But if you are able to thread all of that together, then that is how you make your application stand out. Next question, how is your secondment going? How does the US compare to London? My secondment's going all right, I think. I would definitely say if you are in a position where you have the opportunity that a company is paying for you to relocate abroad for a period of time, take it. I love to travel generally. I love experiencing like new cultures, and even though, you know, America, I mean, they still speak English here and all that kind of stuff, but it is a different culture, so that has been cool. And I also haven't been, I've been to Disney World before, but I haven't been to like America before, and I haven't been as an adult either. So this has been a very different experience for me culturally, which has been cool. It's been nice for me to live alone, because in London I don't live alone, I live with family. So that's been cool as well. Work-wise, it's been cool because in the US, they don't have the same concept of a trainee that we do in the UK. So it's been, I guess, easier for me to kind of just be like, oh, I want to have a go with doing this. And they're kind of like, oh, well, you've been at the firm for 2 years, so yeah, you should know how to do that. And they just let me kind of have a go with it. And obviously, like, check my work and all that kind of stuff. But I think there is definitely more opportunity to have more responsibility, which is quite cool as well. I think there's a lot of, and this might be Houston specific to be fair, but there's definitely a lot of like Southern hospitality. People are very friendly here. Again, I like that. That's quite cool. So overall, positive experience. How does it compare to the London office? It's kind of hard because obviously I'm in a different team. I think it would be easier to compare if I did like capital markets or private equity out here or something like that, and then I could compare it to, you know, capital markets or private equity in London. But I guess just generally, maybe the culture of the two different offices, I think those are different, because the American culture is a bit different to like the British culture, if that makes sense, just in terms of like how people are on a non-working basis. I think that's a bit different. I think work-wise, there is probably less of a FaceTime culture, in the sense that you can be working from anywhere. I find, this is just my experience, but in America, I guess because people are often flying to the other American offices quite often, and like there's a lot more flying to meet your client in, I don't know, LA or in California or in New York or in Boston or whatever. There's less of a, you need to be in the office for me to see you kind of thing, and there's more of a, You just need to kind of do the work, because we understand that you might be anywhere for whatever reason, usually a work-related reason, but like you're probably going to be somewhere else, but you're still doing the work, if that makes sense. Other than that, everything else is pretty similar. It is definitely like one firm, like there is definitely you can feel that it's the same firm, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's cool. I have loved the experience so far, so it's been good. Next question is, I wondered how you found juggling being a trainee and new to a team and developing skills like project management. I guess, okay, for that skill in particular, there are some teams where you're just going to develop it because the type of work you're doing will force you to develop it. So if I give an example of private equity, a due diligence process, right? Due diligence is like a work stream. You're trying to vet a company to see if it's worth buying, or it's worth your client buying rather. And with that, there's a lot of project management, because oftentimes you'll be delegating to different specialist teams for them to review particular parts. So you might be delegating to the litigation team for them to see if there's any litigation that we should be worried about. You might be delegating to IP for them to see if there's any like trademark stuff we should be worried about, all that kind of stuff, right? So there's project management, because you as like the member of the corporate team, you're overseeing the whole process. You know what the client cares about in terms of their bottom line, and then you kind of have to then feed that back to the specialist teams and then collate all of that information into a report, all that kind of stuff. So because of the nature of the work, you're just going to pick up project management, right? There are some teams where you might not pick up project management as much, but let's say I wanted to do like my own upskilling. So we have like a learning and development dashboard where we can kind of do courses at any given time online whenever we want to. So if I just wanted to do my own upskilling off my own back, what I usually do is once a month I dedicate at least an hour, and I literally have the time in my calendar, like training. I don't always know what the training is, because obviously I have to go onto the learning and development platform to then pick what training I want to do, but I always block out an hour for me to do some kind of upskilling. And that's something I would just advise people to do as well. It's up to you whether you want to do it monthly or weekly or quarterly or whatever, but dedicate some time to you learning something. And the reason why I do that is because it's very easy, especially in the seats that I've done, all transactional seats, it's very easy to just get lost in, like, you know, you're constantly going from deal to deal, you're constantly meeting with partners, you're constantly networking with people. You don't always remember to put learning at the forefront. So for me, because it's in the calendar, when I get to that particular week and I see that, oh, yep, I have to do an hour of learning, it just reminds me to go onto the platform and pick something to go and learn for an hour. And I could pick a skill like project management or any other skill that I want to focus on as well. So that's the most practical tip I can give you to make sure that you can balance that. Just set aside some time to force yourself to do it, and then you have to get it done. Final question that we've got is, what's been the most eye-opening or surprising thing you've learned? It could be anything about yourself, how working in commercial law really is, the work, anything. I guess anything you didn't expect from your TC. Good question. I think, and I would probably caveat this first of all by saying that this is probably any job, probably, just from what I'm hearing from other people. But I think for me, it's, I spent a lot of time like wanting to be good at certain things. So like at school, I wanted to get good grades. At uni, I wanted good grades, like all that kind of stuff. Law school, like I got a distinction, etc., etc. When I actually got into the working world, I realized that you're, like, yes, people are smart, don't get me wrong. Smart as in like they have good grades, but that only really gets you so far, and it's really not that deep. Like, you being academically astute, yeah, like it's cool, but it's also like, yeah. What does get you really far is like your interpersonal skills, your ability to understand office politics, as it were, your networking skills, like all that kind of stuff. There's way more emphasis on that than there is on your technical aptitude. And I guess it's just kind of because like the real world isn't an exam. Like, you don't need to memorize something and regurgitate it for your examiner. If a client asks you a question, you can Google it. If a partner asks you a question, you can Google it. Like, you don't have to just know everything like that. Do you get what I mean? So there's, yes, it is important to like know how to do certain things, but there's way more focus on the personal development, the soft skills, all that kind of stuff, than there is on the technical skills. So I think that's something that it wasn't like a bad shock. I feel like shock sometimes has a negative connotation. So it wasn't bad, but it was just kind of like, oh, okay, I don't really need to focus on being the best at getting a particular grade. What I need to focus on is more like upskilling and learning how to be a better me and all that kind of stuff, which I took on board pretty quickly. So yeah, that's what I would say I've learned there. But that's all the questions for this month. I hope you found them really helpful. If you have any further questions that you want me to address in the next video that I do, I'm going to try and do it next month, but I'm not going to make any promises. Please do send them to me in the usual way, or you can comment them down below and I will get them answered. If you like this type of content, please do make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, and I'll be back again soon with another video.